right, welcome, everybody. We are back down live on the floor of the SIBO. The market's just closed, and today actually was the first big sell-off we've seen in quite a while. So I can't wait to get some thoughts about what happened today from our guest. But let me read this disclaimer to everybody first, let you know about us. The Minds of Markets podcast is an exploration, a deep dive into the minds of some of the best traders and investors in the market. And our goal is to help you, the listener, learn from some of the best out there to improve your knowledge and skill set as a trader or as an investor. The opinions expressed in this podcast, there are opinions only. None of the information contained in the podcast constitutes a recommendation that any particular security, portfolio of security, transaction, or investment strategy is suitable for any specific person. Trading is risky, and past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Okay, now that the lawyers are off my case and we've got the legal stuff out of the way here, I am going to introduce someone that a lot younger than me, but someone that I really look up to because I have seen this person. I think, Jenny, when we first met, you were actually right out of college, if I'm not mistaken, with your first job back at TD. But let me introduce Jenny Horne. And Jenny is part of the Schwab Network. She's co-host of NextGen Investing. That focuses on market news, trending stories, and trading skills for the next generation of investors. And that's something we're going to talk about today. She's also a regular correspondent across the network. She got her start in live production as a producer and writer for Broadcast Management Group. Prior to that, she worked as a municipal bond trading firm in Chicago. She has a bachelor degree in broadcast journalism and English from, yes, ILL.
I.
Thank you. The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign happens to be my alma mater as well. And in her free time, as anybody that follows her on social media knows, she is an avid marathon runner, aspiring triathlete, and she loves to read. And I don't have it in my notes here, I think you also love your cat, right?
I think that they're maybe behind me right now because they love to,
oh, nice.
They love to be in these camera shots. I'm like, these cats sleep all day long, but right when I turn on the camera, they'll be here.
You know what? I've had that as well. In fact, I may have even been on an interview with you once or someone else from the network from home when one of my 4 dogs kind of slipped in a little bit. And, it is what it is these days. So
right.
We are really, really excited and so thankful that you're taking the time out, especially this time of year, to join us for a little bit. And, again, your story to me is really remarkable because you are that next generation. I'm admitting it. I have kids that are, your age as well. So I've seen the progression of people your age, but I love what you have done because coming out of college, you went into this world of broadcasting and finance, and boom, a few years later, you are like, one of the faces of a major network. How did you get here?
It was a long journey, Scott. So I have to say that it wasn't like as seamless as perhaps maybe one would think. And unfortunately, there are lots of videos somewhere on the internet of me like 22 years old. And I am just ashamed of that person. I mean, but I guess you have to start somewhere, right? And so it's transparent because I feel like my journey has been so authentic. My background, like you said, was in broadcast journalism. So I really had no market experience. So coming into this role, I was kind of like, hey, I can write and I can learn and I'm willing to. We got to work at the time at like 3:30 a.m. So I was willing to do all those things. So they were like, yeah, sure, tired. And it's just taken truly so much education. And I have taken like a few business courses on the side because I realized there's like a slight educational gap and that bothered me, but it has taken a lot of late nights and I think engrossing yourself in this world. And I also think, unfortunately, there's a lot of lingo that's used that can seem sort of hard to break through where you're like, I have no idea what these people are talking about. I mean, my friends will tell me they have no idea what I'm talking about, but
you should come down to the floor behind me one day and hear the lingo, but down here.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yes.
And I tried to sort of sift through that and hopefully, like as a reporter now, I try to be as simple as possible because I'm like, hey, wait a second. This is really accessible information. It's just not always told that way.
So I get bashed for this once in a while, once every great while, because I have a very old person mindset, right? From the prior generation.
Mm-hmm.
But you hit on something to me that personally I think is lacking with the next gen of people. You said, you came out and you're doing whatever you needed to do. You're up, in the middle of the night and you're studying and you're getting to work at the broadcast at 3:30 and just grinding your way through. And to me, I see too many people, and again, maybe I'm just overgeneralizing here, but I see too many of the younger generation, especially after having come out of the lockdown and COVID and maybe not having the greatest college experience, but coming out and just not wanting to have to do or to have the mindset of, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get where I want to go. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z extra, as opposed to my employer just saying, all right, do this, and then I'm going to go home. I mean, what do you say about that? Because I know I get a lot of heat for that. I get a lot of heat for that, especially from my kids. But that's the way I see it.
I think some of my peers might say I work a little bit too much or that I'm a little bit too committed to the job. But I mean, what is worth achieving unless it's challenging? I mean, I am a person where I could never sit still. Like if I felt like I was just stuck, basically, that would drive me crazy. So this has been truly the most rewarding experience because I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly humbled by, new things happen in the markets all the time, which is why I sort of fell in love with it. It's every year. Earlier this year, we're talking about this recession and the Fed, and look at what happened this year. I think no one could have predicted that we would be at all-time highs now ending 2023. So I think that is what's so fun is we're all somewhat learning together. I had to learn a little bit more, but I do think it speaks to the fact that you can find, it's difficult, but you can find all these resources out there and good educational tools, but it's a shame that it's just not instilled, I think, sooner. But gosh, I like the grind, and I think that that's maybe perhaps a detriment sometime, but I've loved getting to learn, and every single day I learn. Like today, I was talking to Oliver Rennick, and he was telling me about the Feds and rate, and I'm like, I'm still constantly learning. I cannot imagine never ever learning at like age 28. That would be terrible.
Isn't it unbelievable? So let me ask you something. What did you learn about the markets, or what's your interpretation of what happened today? We've been rolling along here, grinding higher to, like you said, all-time highs, kind of doing the same thing this morning up until about 1 o'clock or so. And then it seemed like the floor just gave away. And, we ended the day down significantly lower. I didn't see much news yet to cause that. Was that, what was the talk around the studio? Was there some technical, indicator that set people off the sell button today, or what were you guys talking about?
God, you're asking the $1 million question. This is the worst day to ask me this because I was on the show with Oliver Rennick as we were just like completely fading, and we're both like scrambling, looking at our Thinkorswim. We're like,
me too.
I'm on Twitter. We're both like texting each other because he's on air and I'm mic'd, so we're like not talking but trying to talk.
Yeah,
with no idea. No, and that's honestly what's so fun about markets is things could happen, and you're like, I have no issue saying that I have no idea, because I don't think anyone really, unless there's someone out there, a market maker, that could give me more context. But we were scratching our heads.
I was here during it. I was literally here, and the S&P 500 pit is right behind me, and nobody knew a thing other than, maybe the sellers came in and it just kind of, one led to the other. But that's the beauty of what we do, and how we need to be always flexible, and how we need to be kind of forward thinking, because we need to always be prepared. What's our next move, right? Almost like, I'm going to use a sports reference because you're so into sports, almost like a point guard or a quarterback,
Right,
where you see the whole field. And I would imagine with what you do also, you're on air and something happens, sometimes you got to go off script a little bit, right? So you've got to be prepared for that.
Oh yeah, you do. And it's funny, I don't think you realize while watching, like while we're speaking, someone is also probably in my ear talking to me while I'm talking, which is always a delight because there's like many voices.
You're like, shut up.
Right. It's like, I'm like truly like hearing voices, but I think that the breaking news is the most fun. Like the day that ARM IPO'd this year was such a blast because all day we were just waiting, all morning, I should say, all day to me, because I wake up at like 3 a.m. But all morning we're just waiting for that thing to start trading. And that's so fun because you're just like watching the tick chart. And that's, to me, the best. I love breaking news. But today is an unfortunate example because it was a complete mystery. Usually it's like some Fed speaker said something.
Yeah, absolutely. Or some, the unemployment report came out, PCE, whatever it was. And today it was just like, oh, we got a little sell-off. And it did coincide. I know there was some news during the day about a prisoner swap with Venezuela, but which seemed just kind of, half-assed as it is. And I wouldn't expect that of, rattled the markets, but we also have to keep it in perspective, right? A day like today, I mean, after the run we've had, you know what? It's just all part of it.
I know Santa Claus rally. It seems like he had to like restock his sleigh or something because
exactly.
I mean, given the outperformance we saw, in November, even through this month, which you actually called. I'm not sure if you remember, but I was on right after you, and you were like, December is going to be a lot of the same what we've seen. That was like 3 weeks ago, and you so far are spot on.
Well, I think you're right because, a lot of people think Santa Claus rally is the entire month of December. And what it actually is the last 5 trading days of the month and then the next 3 or the first 3 trading days of January. So we've come so far that to continue this through the end of the month for the next couple of weeks here, that to me was going to be very difficult. So as you said, maybe this pullback a little bit is letting him restock his sleigh so we can actually get that rally. I'm not buying into that. I think we definitely have come, way too far too fast. But even if we ended right here, I'll call it a December rally instead of a Santa Claus rally. It sure looks good. But, I think there's some caution to be had out there. And not just because we saw a day like today. Yes, the economy is maybe getting better in terms of what the Fed wants to see. So, that's going to what's been causing rates to come down and the Fed expectations to change. But maybe with these economic numbers coming in not as good as they had been, lighter, which is a good thing for the market. But if you think about it, we want the economy to be strong.
Right.
And so I'm concerned that down the road a little bit, that we're going to run into some bumps here because the consumer is, they're still spending, but the debt that they've racked up is brutal.
And I really don't know why more people aren't talking about that because that is a major concern. I mean, I love, this is my recent fascination of like 2023 is I do the CPI, PPI right after you. And I find them so fascinating because I'm always complaining about grocery prices and I'm always like immersed in it. And then you see that reflected in those numbers. I'm like, this is something I think if more people knew what it was, they would care. But I mean, these numbers are still inflated on a year-over-year basis. Everyone cheers that we're seeing this disinflation, but that doesn't mean we're back. We're still in an inflated market. And no slowing in consumer spending, but every single day. And I mean, not to make light of a situation, but like every single day we talk about like, for example, yesterday, Enphase Energy laying off 10% of its workforce. And
couldn't agree more.
So I'm like, so people aren't working, but people are still spending. Credit card debt is insane. And then you have companies like Affirm, these buy now.
I was just going to say that.
And so now they're offering their services at Walmart for their self-service kiosks. And I'm like, that is as someone that has used Affirm too many times, I'm like, so basically I'm too familiar with the buy now, pay later, but you learn your lesson because it's 6 months down the road and you're still making these substantial payments that you didn't plan for. So I'm like, when does this catch up? When do we start to?
Well, I think it is.
You'd hope.
I think it is because that's why delinquencies are at an all-time high as well.
Right. And I mean, that's what's been interesting to watch some of these, like the lender, obviously, situation. But I don't see that improving in 2024 because I just still feel like the consumer, as far as like retail spend and overall health, I mean, October was, I was reading it was like one data point, but the consumer spent the most in October they have in 10 years in the United States. It was like $1.57 trillion, which is just insane. And I know there was the shopping holidays, what have you, but
well, I know my wife added to that way too much than I had hoped for.
I know I also added to that too, but it's like this doesn't make sense. Eventually,
no.
And like the way that like for like travel, I mean, over the summer, international travel was, I mean, personally, I know every single person I knew was in Europe. So I was like, no issue of money there, but it just hasn't seemed like the consumer has pulled back alongside then the rest of the market. Eventually this has to catch up. And companies are, I mean, there's many companies that are not hiring that are, it just goes, my grievances with this go so deep, but I'm like, this is something more people should care about because I think this is easy to digest if you break it down the right way.
Well, I think that in months from now, and I'm not saying like all the way at the end of 2024, I'm saying January, February, March, I think we can go back to this conversation we're having right now and probably say, yeah, it's rearing its ugly head here. So I hope I'm wrong. I don't want anything bad to happen. I'm not being a naysayer or a doomslayer or anything. Markets are great, but I just think that there's a wall of worry out there and we need to be very cautious about it.
I completely agree. I'm like the perpetual bull because I'm like, I like when everyone makes money. I like when everyone's happy. I mean, at least the bulls are happy. So this is
funner, right?
Yeah, but it's just hard to ignore, I think, the obvious right now. And it's like, eventually consumers have to pull back and we haven't seen that at all.
Exactly. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to do one more example on this Gen Z thing. And then I want to hear about what the next gen, your program is all about. So I had lunch today with old friend of mine. We've literally been friends for 40 plus years. He's a senior partner in a very large law firm here in Chicago. And we were just talking about business. And he said, from the hiring side of things, it has been so incredibly difficult because the younger generation coming out who are either, getting hired as a clerk or their first year, with their law license, they're getting hired. They're just not real good. But yet, because of the way the labor market has been, they've got to pay these people 25% more than they had been because of the tight labor market. And he's like, it's just so disappointing because our turnover has been so unbelievable. Are you seeing that at all amongst your peers, your circle of people at your age with their jobs?
Well, so I'm curious before I answer now, was this person, were their employees working from home or were they in the office?
They're in the office. And that's another thing also, because some of the younger people, they want that work-life balance. They don't want to be in the office.
And hey, I'm not, and I totally get that. And this is a week where I'm like, it would be lovely to be at home for a day or two because I have a million things to do outside of work. I mean, but I think there's no mystery why people are fighting staying home so much because you're not being as productive. I mean, like that's just, I can admit, I was home for like 6 months and I would go on a run for 2 hours in the middle of the day because I had nothing to do. So, I mean, like, that is something I think if you're fighting so hard to remain away from an environment where you could grow, you could like connect with others, then what are you really like what are you fighting for? I do think that there has been this shift and this is, I even hate to like reference this because I don't have a TikTok, but I feel like with the rise of the influencer, my brother is younger than he's like 20 years old, I think. And he's like, no one wants to work. Everyone wants to be an influencer. And I'm like, that is, first of all, it sounds awful to me, which is funny because I show my face every day anyway, but I'm like, that sounds awful. And it's a very bizarre because I'm like, eventually this is a trend. I mean, money can only go so far. Those ad dollars we've talked about all year long have faded. So I'm like, that is not, I mean, I respect the industry, but it concerns me about the youth, Scott. I mean, I'm
right. Now you're talking like my generation. I love it. I love it.
You said you had a dated view, and I'm like, I totally do too. I'm totally like, get yourself to the office.
Exactly. And just, do what you need to do. Don't punch a clock. Don't sit around waiting for someone to tell you what to do. Just work. And that's how you're going to get where you want to go down the road. It's not going to be handed to you as I think too many people think it will be. All right. Enough of my soapbox talking about that. I want to hear now the next gen investing. Okay. Tell me, obviously your target is for, the younger generation. How many people do you think, either of your peers, people that are watching, how many of that younger generation are actually active in the markets, whether it's day trading, is it something these people can do? What are you providing for them to maybe entice them into this?
So that's a really good question, because I think we're working out. At first, the concept of our show was the trendiest names, like whatever is all over Reddit. And I am all over Reddit. I have like an alias because I'm like, I don't want anyone to ever see what I do on, but I'm on Reddit and I'm following these like Wall Street bets crazy people. But that was the concept of the show when it was meme stocks were all the rage. Now it's evolved, and I can't say that specifically we're like just targeting young people, because frankly, I don't think that many young people are trading as they should be. Like, I just think that's the reality, is we're trying to get more of that young viewership. And I'm like posting all these videos where my friends are like, we don't know what you're saying, but I'm like, I'm trying to make it at least accessible, but that's something we're working on. Our focus now is like the highest volume stocks, which is a blast because it's Tesla, it's Nvidia, it's Apple.
Yeah.
So it's all the stocks that just see like phenomenal volume, but every now and then you get a good one that's like a firm, for example. And I feel like those are really fun because you get to look at these names with like massive volatility, massive swings. So it's supposed to be for more of that type of trader, because I think targeting the younger demographic is hard. And I have to say that just from my own experience trading, a lot of young people don't have the money, which I'm like, you should just set aside, like I set aside a very small percentage of every single paycheck to then trade. People just aren't willing to do that because people want to spend all their money, like we were saying.
Right. Right. You know, I wish, as being in the business of trading and teaching people how to trade, I wish that this next generation coming in would realize that trading does work. Day trading, swing trading, it does work, but no one's going to give you money. Right? No one's going to say, okay, just go buy your calls in Affirm or Carvana or, you know, whatever the next hot one is, and you're going to make money. There are reasons to trade a certain way. And I think, again, so many people, and I guess this isn't just the younger generation, so many people I teach don't want to listen. They don't want to learn. Mm-hmm. They just want to say, just tell me what to do. Tell me the trade to make. Don't teach me. And to me, that's one of the biggest downfalls and one of the biggest reasons why I believe so many people are unsuccessful trading, when if you actually spend your time and do your, you know, due diligence and really learn, like anything else, this can be incredibly successful.
I completely agree. And it's that instant gratification that so many people want. And you hear, I do know a few people around my age that are interested in like crypto and like the spot ETF, and I get that. And like I had a few friends that actually did quite well with all the Dogecoin, which that's a gamble. I mean, that.
Oh man, Oliver and I used to go back and forth on the Dogecoin. That was some fun times.
That was, gosh, and like that just, we never even mentioned that sense. But I feel like people, GameStop was another one where my friends were like, I buy GameStop, and I was like, I don't know about that, but like there is that interest when it reaches like headline news, but I think it's all about instant gratification. It's, hey, if I buy this, can I make a lot of money? And it's like, well, that's not the reason you should trade. That's the number one. That's the number one reason why you're not going to be trading tomorrow, because your account's going to be down to zero. Right. And I mean, like am I allowed to say what I'll just admit.
Have at it.
It's a tragedy. I bought Peloton at like, gosh, $8. And I was like, this thing won't go lower. And I very, very quickly learned my lesson, because it sure did go lower. But
it can.
It has to be more of just like this experience where you like lose a bunch of money and then say, okay, I mean, it's been like years in the making that I'm finally comfortable trading, but people don't want that. They want that instant, like almost sports betting, like win or gamble. And I think
it's a recipe for disaster. It really is. And, you know, I've been trading professionally for literally 35 years. I know it doesn't seem like it can be that old, but for 35 years. And in the way that I've always traded is grinding things out, right? My mindset, which is not typical of many traders, especially day traders, is, you know what? I want to be the best bunter on the team. I want to have the highest batting average on the team, right?
Me too.
And I know I'm going to lose nearly 50% of the time. And you have to be able to accept that. But if you look to grind things out, as opposed to having that mindset of, oh, can I buy these calls or these puts and make a ton of money overnight? You know what? You stay in the game, you build and you build and you build. And that, to me, is the mode of success. And again, I wish more people, especially younger people, could kind of grasp that, or at least take the advice of people like myself that have been doing this forever and ever and ever, and say, this is how you get to be successful in the long run.
Absolutely. And I also think it's so cool having a better understanding of this world, because I follow publications like Wall Street Journal and some of these like various like stock specific stories on Instagram. And every now and then, I mean, I do my darndest to not respond and like argue with these people on the internet, because people will,
It's so easy, isn't it?
oh my
Get
God,
yourself caught up.
but I'm like, it's the worst look to argue with strangers on the internet. So I cannot get involved. But people will say things like, like about trading schemes, like corporate greed and like Wall Street's like so corrupt. And I'm like, you don't even, you said, well, first of all,
No.
You just sound uneducated. But I'm like, if that is like the perception, that has to change, because it's actually such a cool thing, understanding like the cogs of our country. I mean, that's what sort of got me first interested, was I was like, wait, this is actually really cool. I understand now like why companies do what they do, and then why we see stocks move like they do. And then now it's involved into trading like they do. So I'm like, it's actually such a interesting and everyday, I think, a blast thing to look at. But people just, unfortunately, I think, have a skewed perception that like Wall Street is unattainable, or we're all corrupt. And I'm like, no, actually, this is like the backbone of the U.S. economy, and it's something that more people should care about, frankly.
I agree. And you know what, for what it's worth, and I actually made it somewhat mandatory for my boys when they were in college, whether they wanted to major in it or not. I think everyone needs to take a basic economics class. I don't care what your major is, whether your major is foreign language, history, whatever it is, take a basic economics class, because that just opens things up. And, I think people that are, saying the kinds of things that you were just talking about probably don't really have a grasp on how economics work.
Oh, and it so frustrates me. So I actually it's so funny, like in college, you can choose like 7 subsectors, and the only one I didn't take was economics, which is hilarious because now that's exactly what I do. So
There you go.
I took a free economic class during the pandemic, because I was like, I do feel like that's like the gap I'm missing, like more of the why, not the what. So that I totally recommend it. I think it's something that you use in your daily life. You see things happen and you're like, well, that makes sense because I followed this. And I think, again, more people should be educated, but it's unfortunate how many people are just frankly uneducated. And maybe don't.
And you know what? There's a lot of free education out there also, if someone wanted to take it upon themselves to just, learn a little bit.
Oh yeah. I traded in paper money for like probably a year and a half before I actually placed a trade, because I was like,
that's another thing too.
It's huge.
That is definitely another thing. Everybody wants that instant gratification. Mm-hmm. We make it mandatory for our students at Prosper, when they come on board, that even if they've had a significant amount of time trading and experience, we make it mandatory that, at least as far as we know, they start on the simulated paper trading platform, because you need to understand the ins and outs, and you're going to make mistakes. It happens to everybody. So make them as you're practicing. And
I will say though that so after like a year and a half of paper money, and I was like, I'm ready. I'm putting money into this thing. Losing money the first time when it's real money is the most valuable lesson.
Yeah.
Oh, it hurts a lot worse than paper money.
Oh, it sure does. It sure does. All right. I am not going to take up any more of your time. You have been so gracious. This has been unbelievable. And I think, we love talking to people in the business, in other, sorts of sectors or other businesses, but also of different age levels and generations. And you to me again, are so impressive because of, seriously, coming out of college with no background in finance, and here you are, you are a major face of this network, and it's pretty awesome. So I think you do a great job.
This is so much more fun. I'm so used to speaking in like such a structured mindset. So this was a blast. But I had someone tell me, so the first thing I ever did was this show Virtual Trade, where we acted like I was playing this new trader, but really I had no idea how to trade. And I fully owned that. And I had someone say to me, like outside, like a friend that was like, do you know how unintelligent you sound? And I was like,
oh gosh.
Well, I mean, granted, I did not know how to trade. I did not know much. My interview, I was Googling what the S&P 500 was versus the NASDAQ, to be transparent. I mean, like, I was fully, like, had no idea, but I was, like, unintelligent. And I truly feel like that's, like, driven me. I'm like, oh, I am not unintelligent.
Never again.
I will work my butt off to make sure that that is never said about me again.
No, that's awesome. And again, thank you so much. Last question, parting question here. If there was anybody you'd like for us to interview that you would like to see, could be at the network, anywhere else, what kind of person would you like to see here on this podcast?
Is it biased if I say someone that's on the Schwab Network with me?
Not at all. Not at all.
You know, I hate to give him more credit, but I have to say.
Oh, you're going to say Ben?
No, I was going to say Oliver.
Oh, okay.
So I just interviewed Oliver. I mean, this won't, like, it won't spoil anything, but like I was interviewing him for our like year in review stuff, and basically was asking him about his interview styling and like the way that because he talks to so many like CFOs, CEOs, and I'm like, how do you make it different than everyone else? And his mindset on like just markets and like his perception on companies and like their balance sheets. I hate to give him all this credit, but it's really.
I know he's a critical thinker, isn't he?
Yeah, the way he's brain, and you should see this guy. I mean, he's literally tweeting me, text, like we'll be about to be on a segment, and his multitasking skills blow my mind. No wonder he can critical think, because he has like 9 thoughts at once. I mean, again, maybe never tell him I said this, but he is the way that he thinks about interviews and like Fed and the bond market. It blows my mind still.
That's awesome. So Oliver Rennick, everybody. Oliver Rennick. All right, Jenny, thank you so much. I wish you and your family Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays. You know, keep getting at it, keep doing what you do. And I love working with you when I have the opportunity to come over to the studio or to be interviewed. So it's always awesome.
I'm always on right after you on Future. So I always feel like I listen to you because I'm always right after you. But I appreciate it. This was so fun and so much better than me like formally speaking like I usually have to do.
No, it's great. It's great. Again, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we will see you. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday.
You too, Scott.
Thanks, Jenny.